Thanks for joining us at Christians Keeping It 100. We pray you and your family are well. In this video we're going to explain some of the mysteries surrounding the great Yeshua, known as the modern-day Jesus. Some of the information we are going to share isn't meant to confuse, manipulate, or get you to believe anything outside of what your spirit and heart is telling you. This video is made to share the things we've researched about Jesus with the hopes of gaining a greater understanding of what these things have to say for ourselves. So in 1945, a peasant from Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt discovered a red clay jar that contained 13 ancient manuscript scrolls bound in leather that are now known as the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Qumran Cave Scrolls. One of the texts was even taken out of the country and sold on the black market. Later, it was discovered that it contained the well-known Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is grounded in Gnosticism, the philosophical and religious movement of the 2nd century CE that stressed the redemptive power of esoteric knowledge acquired by divine revelation. The Gospel of Thomas is written in Coptic and is believed to have existed in Greek but was long believed to have perished with the exception of a few fragments. The discovery led to much attention, including claims that it was a lost gospel. Rumors for centuries have said that the First Council of Nicaea, called by Emperor Flavius Constantine, assembled in 325 AD, reviewed every manuscript carefully, and decided what should be kept and what should be dropped from the New Testament. This would be later known as Christian theology. It was said that they allegedly changed and deleted books that suited them, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and numerous others. The widely accepted theory is that this was done so that everyone would have very easy access and understanding of everything. The other argument, however, is a little more intriguing and argues that the manuscripts were eliminated because they held extremely powerful and ancient information that did not line up with the course the Church desired to go. In this brief study we are going to try our best to summarize some of these books and transcripts to see what our spirit is telling us as well as what we can learn about some of the mysteries and teachings of Yeshua. The Gospel of Thomas was interesting to examine. One of the most well-known Gospels outside of the Bible seems to be the Gospel of Thomas, and many people seem curious about both its contents and its origins. Many contend that it belonged in the Bible or that it represents an early Christian group that opposed what is now known as mainstream Christianity and that it taught a different Jesus than what is seen in the current canonical Gospels. Thomas is only a collection of statements that Jesus is alleged to have said to his disciple. It is not a narrative like the canonical Gospels are. Theology-wise, the Gospel of Thomas's view of the world is very different from that of the New Testament. According to Thomas, Jesus is not the way, the truth, or the light. Rather, he is merely a teacher who shows others how to achieve enlightenment inside themselves. Fasting and prayer are also considered bad in the Gospel of Thomas, whereas they are praised by Jesus in the canonical Gospels. Thomas's apparent familiarity with various New Testament texts is intriguing. It includes quotations or paraphrases from Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, Hebrews, 1 John, and even Revelation. This is quite significant because either Thomas was the foundation for all of these New Testament works, or Thomas was just aware of the texts and used them. In the Gospel of Thomas, Yeshua presents a challenge or almost a riddle to the reader. He says that if you can correctly understand the hidden message in this book, you will never die and live forever. Jesus said, "The seeker should not stop until he finds." When he does find, he will be disturbed. After having been disturbed, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all. Note, these are not the universally known teachings from the Bible. The Gospel of Thomas claims that these are the hidden teachings of Christ. This hidden gospel continues by warning the reader that it will be challenging to decipher and comprehend this secret without an open mind. The most interesting one of them all is the one that disturbs most, the verse when Yeshua says, "If your leaders say to you, 'Look, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds will be there before you are. If they say that the kingdom is in the sea, then the fish will be there before you are. Rather, the kingdom is within you and it is outside of you." This is saying that the kingdom of God isn't anywhere else. It's not in heaven when you die, it's not in the sky, it's not under the sea, and it's not sometime in the future. It's right here and now inside of you and all around you. It says when you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons and daughters of the living Father. This is saying two very important things, and it has to do with the internal and external. These teachings aren't about sin and repentance or worshiping God, it's about self-knowledge and seeing through the illusion. When you finally know what you truly are, you'll know that you are divine. Again, this is just a brief insight to some of the wisdom from the Gospel of Thomas, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. But for the sake of this episode, we'll leave this one alone for the time being. Next on the list was the unknown life of Jesus Christ. Ancient scrolls reveal that Jesus might have spent 17 years in India and Tibet. From age 13 to age 29, he was both a student and teacher of Buddhist and Hindu holy men. The story of his journey from Jerusalem to Benares was recorded by Brahmin historians. Today they still know him and love him as Saint Isa, their Buddha. Nicholas Notovich in 1894 published his book named The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. He was a Russian doctor who journeyed extensively throughout Afghanistan, India, and Tibet. Notovich journeyed through the lovely passes of Bolan, over the Punjab, down into the arid rocky land of Ladakh, and into the majestic vale of Kashmir of the Himalayas. During one of his journeys he was visiting Leh, the capital of Ladakh, near where the Buddhist convent, Himas, is. He had an accident that resulted in his leg being broken. This gave him the unscheduled opportunity to stay a while at the Himas convent. Notovich learned, while he was there, that there existed ancient records of the life of Jesus Christ. In the course of his visit at the great convent, he located a Tibetan translation of the legend and carefully noted in his carnet de voyage over 200 verses from the curious document known as The Life of Saint Isa. He was shown 2 large yellowed volumes containing the biography of Saint Isa. Notovich enlisted a member of his party to translate the Tibetan volumes while he carefully noted each verse in the back pages of his journal. When he returned to the Western world, there was much controversy as to the authenticity of the document. He was accused of creating a hoax and was ridiculed as an impostor. In his defense, he encouraged a scientific expedition to prove the original Tibetan documents existed. One of his skeptics was Swami Abhedananda. Abhedananda journeyed into the Arctic region of the Himalayas, determined to find a copy of the Himas manuscript or to expose the fraud. His book of travels, entitled Kashmir o Tibeti, tells of a visit to the Himas Gonpa and includes a Bengali translation of 224 verses, essentially the same as the Notovich text. Abhedananda was thereby convinced of the authenticity of the Isa legend. In 1925, another Russian named Nicholas Rurik arrived at Himas. Rurik was a philosopher and a distinguished scientist. He apparently saw the same documents as Notovich and Abhedananda, and he recorded in his own travel diary the same legend of Saint Isa. Rurik quotes legends which have the estimated antiquity of many centuries. And it reads as follows. Near Lhasa was a temple of teaching with a wealth of manuscripts. Jesus was to acquaint himself with them. Mengste, a great sage of all the East, was in this temple. Finally Jesus reached a mountain pass, and in the chief city of Ladakh, Leh, he was joyously accepted by monks and people of the lower class. And Jesus taught in the monasteries and in the bazaars, the marketplaces, wherever the simple people gathered, there he taught. Not far from this place lived a woman whose son had died, and she brought him to Jesus. And in the presence of a multitude, Jesus laid his hand on the child, and the child rose healed. And many brought their children, and Jesus laid his hands upon them, healing them. Among the Ladakhis, Jesus, Isa, passed many days, teaching them. And they loved him, and when the time of his departure came, they sorrowed as children. We'd probably be crying to see him leave too, and that's definitely an interesting story of Jesus from long ago. So when Abhedananda was at the Himas monastery in 1922 and allegedly found the manuscript translated by Notovich, which was a Tibetan translation of the original scrolls written in Pali. The Lama said that it was a copy and that the original was in a monastery at Marbur near Lhasa. After Abhedananda's death in 1939, one of his disciples inquired about the documents at the Himas monastery but was told that they had disappeared. So the mystery still remains of the whereabouts of these scrolls scribed in Pali of Saint Isa that have vanished into time, and may be connected to the untold facts concerning Yeshua as we know it. Going forward we have the Gospel of the Holy 12. The Gospel of the Holy 12 is an attempt to spiritually reconstitute the Christian gospel on the premise that what we have in the Bible is actually not a complete or completely true teaching of Christ. It is believed by some to be the gospel described by many commentators of the early church as the original teachings of the Nazarene called Christ. The Gospel of the Holy 12 presents vegetarian versions of traditional teachings and events described in the canonical New Testament. The first collected volume was issued by the Order of At One Ment and United Templar Society in 1881. It was rediscovered in the late 19th century by British scholar Gideon Ouseley. According to Ouseley, he found the manuscript in a monastery in Tibet where it had been preserved by a group of monks. The Gospel of the Holy 12 is said to be based on the teachings of the Essenes, a Jewish sect that flourished in Palestine during the time of Jesus. The Essenes were known for their strict adherence to the Mosaic Law, their emphasis on communal living, and their belief in the imminent coming of a Messiah who would usher in a new era of peace and prosperity. The Gospel of the Holy 12 contains a wealth of spiritual teachings that emphasize the importance of love, compassion, and service to others. One of the central themes of this gospel is the idea that we are all children of God and that we should treat each other with kindness and respect. This gospel also teaches the importance of prayer, meditation, and spiritual discipline. It encourages us to seek the kingdom of God within ourselves and to develop a deep and meaningful relationship with the divine. In addition, the Gospel of the Holy 12 contains teachings on healing, forgiveness, and the power of faith. It presents Jesus as a teacher and healer who came to bring healing to the sick, comfort to the oppressed, and hope to the hopeless. In an era when masks are falling and many truths come to light, pure-hearted truth seekers will be answered with this uncovered and uncensored gospel where Jesus, through his teachings, explains to humanity why he says no to the meat. In the Gospel of the Holy 12, Jesus, chapter 75, verse 9, it says, "Verily I say unto you, for this end have I come into the world, that I may put away all blood offerings and the eating of the flesh of the beasts and the birds that are slain by men." And also in the Gospel of the Holy 12, Jesus, chapter 75, verse 10, it reads, "In the beginning God gave to all the fruits of the trees and the seeds and the herbs for food. But those who loved themselves more than God or their fellows, corrupted their ways and brought diseases into their bodies." Although compelling in a great way for healthy living, the work still remains unrecognized by academic biblical scholars and has been dismissed by modern theologians and historians of the animal rights movement. In response to a campaign by People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which claimed Jesus was a vegetarian, the Reverend Professor Andrew Lindsay referred to the Gospel of the Holy 12 and similar publications, stating, "Try as I may, I can find no evidence for their antiquity and I deeply fear that they are works of fiction." Richard Allen Young, a professor of New Testament studies, has similarly stated, "It appears that Ouseley created the Gospel of the Holy 12 in support of animal welfare and vegetarianism." There is also a list of the 12 commandments stated in the Gospel of the Holy 12 by Christ shown here. As we wrap this segment of this story up, it says, "Ye shall not take away the life of any creature for your pleasure nor for your profit, nor yet torment it. Ye shall not steal the goods of any, nor gather lands and riches to yourselves beyond your need or use. Ye shall not eat the flesh, nor drink the blood of any slaughtered creature, nor yet anything which bringeth disorder to your health or senses. Ye shall not make impure marriages, where love and health are not, nor yet corrupt yourselves or any creature made pure by the holy. Ye shall not bear false witness against any, nor willfully deceive any by a lie to hurt them. Ye shall not do unto others as ye would not that others should do unto you. Ye shall worship one eternal, the Father Mother of heaven, of whom are all things, and reverence the holy name. Ye shall revere your fathers and your mothers on earth, whose care is for you, and all the teachers of righteousness. Ye shall cherish and protect the weak, and those who are oppressed, and all creatures that suffer wrong. Ye shall work with your hands the things that are good and seemly, so shall ye eat the fruits of the earth, and live long in the land. Ye shall purify yourselves daily and rest the seventh day from labor, keeping holy the Sabbaths and the festivals of your God. Ye shall do unto others as ye would that others should do unto you." Well, that last one's pretty confusing, but nevertheless this story has reached far and still lingers around to this day. Let us know how you feel about the Holy 12 in the comments below. Moving on to the Talmud. The Talmud is a collection of Jewish writings that contains the teachings and opinions of thousands of rabbis on a variety of subjects. It was written from the 4th century onwards and contains less than complimentary references to Yeshua. In terms of his teachings, Yeshua was called a fool in the Talmud, as a result of his claim of being the Son of God. The Talmud also asserts that Jesus was an idolater, particularly in the section that makes the most mention of Jesus, Sanhedrin 103a. Some scholars view the depictions of Yeshua in the Talmud as a manifestation of those intersect rivalries, thus the depictions can be read as polemics by the rabbinic authors of the Talmud, which indirectly criticize the rival sect, Christianity, which was growing and becoming more dominant. The Talmud claims that Jesus was born to a virgin called Miriam in Bethlehem. He was born on the first day of Passover, and the prophet Isaiah predicted his birth. Jesus was revered as a good person who performed signs and wonders. The Roman ruler Pontius Pilate issued the order for Yeshua's execution according to the Talmud. The Talmud has some evidence that shows that the rabbis of that time thought that Jesus was the Messiah, even if it fails to make clear that he was. The Talmud has a generally favorable view of Jesus and his birth. In what is called the Tractate Sanhedrin, there is one of the most well-known passages in the Talmud that speaks about Jesus. The rabbis argue whether or not Jesus should be executed. Rabbi Akiba believes that Jesus should be burned, whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua believes that he should be stoned. In the end, the decision is made to stone Jesus, and Rabbi Akiba's viewpoint is altered. This debate reflects the rabbinic view that Jesus was a false prophet. This is because, in Jewish law, a false prophet is punishable by death. Consequently, the rabbis were debating whether or not Jesus should be put to death for his false teachings. Several legends about Jesus that appear in the Talmud portray him negatively. As an illustration, there is a legend that claims Jesus made a clay calf and adored it. This narrative aims to demonstrate that Jesus was an idolater and not the true God. Additionally, there are some tales that claim Jesus was a sorcerer. According to one legend, Jesus performed sorcery by turning water into wine. In a different tale, he is supposed to have developed a new variety of bean that could be employed magically. These tales imply that the rabbis thought Jesus possessed supernatural abilities. Overall, there are several passages in the Talmud that criticize Jesus, and as we previously indicated, only a very small number of rabbis at the time believed that he was the Messiah or the Son of God. They viewed him as a sorcerer and a fake prophet instead, therefore, they felt that he deserved to be executed. There was recorded the trial of a man named Ben Stada, who is charged with sorcery, is described in the Talmud. The rabbis question Ben Stada about his teacher throughout the trial. He replies that he received his education from the son of Pandera. This response confounds the rabbis, who beg him to elaborate. Then he claims that he obtained his knowledge from the son of the woman who was divorced from Joseph the carpenter. This response shocks the rabbis, who then accuse Ben Stada of blasphemy. They claim that anyone who obtained knowledge from such a person commits a crime punishable by death. Ben Stada is stoned to death after receiving his death sentence. The Talmud contains a number of positive references to Jesus and his teachings. The rabbis who compiled the Talmud clearly regarded Jesus as an important teacher, and his message as one of reconciliation, love, and peace. They also saw his miracles as evidence of his divine power and as signs that he may just be the Messiah. The Talmud mentions nothing of Jesus' death at all, but does contain many indirect statements on many pages that may refer to Jesus, but nothing that was too concrete for the likes of this video. That brings us to the first apocalypse of James. The first apocalypse of James is an early 3rd century Gnostic apocalypse. It is regarded as part of the New Testament Apocrypha. The ancient narrative describes the secret teachings of Jesus to his brother James, in which Jesus reveals information about the heavenly realm and future events, including James' inevitable death. The text was first discovered amongst 52 other Gnostic Christian texts spread over 13 codices by an Arab peasant, Muhammad Ali al-Saman, in the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi late in December 1945. Gnostic texts like the first Apocalypse of James were likely banned because of their different understanding of what Jesus' importance was. They understood Jesus much more in terms of being a revealer of human wisdom than as a Messiah. According to these Gnostic texts, Jesus taught people that the material world was actually a prison created by an evil God. Jesus describes this prison to his brother. He reveals that the world is guarded by demonic figures called archons, who are blocking the path between the material world and the afterlife. The text of the first letter is primarily a dialogue between James, Jesus' brother, and Jesus, with a fragmented account of the martyrdom of James appended to the bottom of the manuscript. The first portion of the text describes James' understandable concern about being crucified, whereas the latter portion describes secret passwords given to James, so that he can ascend to the highest heaven after dying. The second letter is very Gnostic in nature and has less dialogue than the first letter. It has been the source of controversy over the last few decades because it names James' father as Theudas rather than Joseph. This second letter also contains the rather gruesome death of James, which one would expect during a time of Christian persecution. The Romans had invented new and terrible ways to dispose of the unwanted Christians. Very little is known about who authored these texts except for internal claims by James the Just. Since the letters are both fairly different in content and style of language, it is fair to wager at multiple authors were involved. But whoever was involved, they were clearly of a Gnostic theological background. Not much information is available as to whether or not the early church fathers had read and studied these letters. If any of them had read them, it would be assumed that the Alexandrian church fathers would have been the ones with access to these texts. The text begins immediately with dialogue between James and Jesus. Jesus refers to himself as an image of God and explains that everything came from him, who is. He also speaks of femaleness and how it prepared for itself powers and gods, but it did not exist when he came forth. Jesus predicts that he will be seized the day after tomorrow, but his redemption will be very near. He tells James to leave Jerusalem because it is a dwelling place of a great number of archons, and his redemption will be preserved from them. Jesus then explains the nature of the archons and the 72 heavens, which are their subordinates. He explains that him who is has been given on account of them, and they are unnumbered. Jesus tells James that he will no longer be James, but the one who is, and all those who are unnumbered will have been named when he casts away from his blind thought the bond of flesh that encircles him. James asks Jesus how he can reach him who is, given that the powers and hosts of the archons are armed against him. Jesus tells James that the powers are not armed against James specifically but against Jesus himself. Yeshua expresses his concern for James, who has descended into great ignorance but has not been defiled by it, unlike those who have succumbed to it. Jesus acknowledges that he is not like them, but he has clothed himself with everything of theirs. James and Jesus discuss their respective states of mind and being, with Yeshua acknowledging his faint-heartedness before the anger of the archons. The text emphasizes the importance of knowledge and recollection in the pursuit of spiritual understanding and the attainment of salvation. James expresses his fear of the powers that rule the world. Jesus reassures James that he will reveal to him his redemption and everything else, not only for James but for the sake of the faith of many people. After Jesus departs to be crucified, James suffers and is distressed until Jesus reappears to him and explains that he has not suffered and that the people have done him no harm. Jesus explains that the people exist as a type of the archons and that they deserve to be destroyed through them. Jesus warns James that he, as in Jesus, has stirred up great anger and wrath against himself, but that it is necessary for the sake of others. Yeshua tells James that he will undergo suffering but encourages him to not be afraid. Jesus reveals to James that he, James, will be seized and face 3 toll collectors who take away souls by theft. Jesus instructs James to respond to their questioning by declaring himself a son of the pre-existent Father and from the pre-existent One. James should also acknowledge that the alien things they ask about are not entirely alien but are from Achamoth, who is the female and mistress of those things. Jesus explains that Sophia is the mother of Achamoth and the source of the imperishable knowledge that will redeem James. Yeshua identifies himself and all the sons of the pre-existent One, as known by the disciples, and hidden within them. Yeshua instructs James to hide these things within himself and to reveal them to Adai, who will write them down and eventually pass them to Levi and his 2 sons. James is reassured by Jesus that his soul will return to the Father after he is attacked by the archons. He asks about the 7 women who were Jesus' disciples. He discusses the spirits of thought, counsel, knowledge, and fear, and recalls a confrontation with the archon Adonaios. Yeshua also encourages James to cast away bitterness and lawlessness, and to beware of those who envy him. Jesus tells James to always encourage Salome, Miriam, Martha, and Arsino. At the end of the text, we see that James rebukes the archons before unknown speakers argue over the apparent martyrdom of James. So, as we can see, the knowledge and presence of Jesus Christ has been influential for millenniums. Many historians, religious leaders, kings, archaeologists, priests, rabbis, authors, and many more have tried for nearly 2,000 years to define and explain Yeshua, the infamous Jesus of Nazareth. Those efforts have resulted in innumerable ideas about the legend, who walked the ancient roads of Judea approximately 2,000 years ago. What we found was that in 95% of every story that mentions Yeshua, he is bringing peace, love, wisdom, healing, and joy everywhere he went. While historical and theological debates remain about the actions and significance of this figure, his fame as a teacher and the order for his crucifixion under the Roman Pontius Pilate can be described as a historical certainty. Well, we hope you enjoyed this journey of the expedition of Yeshua and will continue to research this even more so on your own. From Christians keeping it 100, take care, God bless, we out.